Hi, and welcome to the Facetron assembly part of this DVD. Now we're going to prepare and assemble a Facetron so that it's ready to fasten on. The first thing we want to do, beginning with the base, it's very important to protect the base from water, the chemicals that you can be found in hard water, from any kind of abrasives, and you're going to be working with all kinds of abrasives. Diamonds, the toughest stuff known to man is going to be against this machine, so we want to protect it as much as possible. So we want to begin by taking some good quality Carnauba-based car wax, some good hard car wax, and just follow the instructions in whatever good hard car wax you find and wax your base. Wax your base really well. Put a coat or two or three of good hard car wax on it. Put it all around under where the splash pan is going to go, and especially under where the base of the mast is going to go. This protects this area from wear and tear, protects it from the abrasives a little bit, protects it from water. So take the time when you're first setting up your machine, put a couple of good coats of good hard car wax on it, and then you'll be all set. So the next thing is we're going to put the mast on the machine. The mast goes on first because we have to get it out of the way so the splash pan can go on. Now the area where the mast is going to sit, where it's going to have a bearing surface against the base, that area is critical to keep really clean, and your fingers can actually feel smaller particles than your eye can see. So always rub this part of the base, and I make a habit of rubbing it with my hand, with the fingers of my hand. Make sure my hand is clean. Rub it with the fingers of my hand here before I put anything on it, and whenever I'm going to move the mast anywhere, I always make sure to mop the base, wipe it very clean with a clean cloth, and also wipe it with the tips of my fingers to make sure I don't feel any grit or anything caught there, and just wipe away anything that might be on it. So here's our mast, and we're preparing to make this bottom part of the mast is going to mate to the machine. So I also rub that with my finger. I want to feel it. I want to feel that it's clean. If there's any kind of grit whatsoever, I want to make sure I get it wiped off. Now make sure that your hand's clean and dry before you do this, because whenever you're fastening, the water that's going to be in and around the machine, any of the water on the machine will have swarf in it, it will have abrasive or diamond in it, and you don't want to rub that water on the base or on the base of the mast. So make sure your hand is clean and dry, and then just double check the surfaces. We're going to take the T-nut and slide it through the hole. It's useful to reach underneath and align the T-nut so that the mast can slide. Rotate the mast. It's going to lock with this lever either away from you or on your side. If it's on your side, it can bump into things and get in the way. Personally, I prefer to have it away from me. So if, as you're setting it up, it happens to lock up on the near side, just slide the mast back over to where the hole is, rotate the T-nut a half of a revolution counterclockwise, and then slide the mast back over. You also, when you're going to move the mast, it's going to lock up pretty easily, and it doesn't require, nothing on the Facetron requires a whole bunch of force. In fact, using a lot of force when you're putting any part of this machine together, you could damage the machine or just cause yourself a lot of grief. So this is about all the force that's necessary to really lock this thing up. There's a very large base here. There's threads underneath. That's a huge mechanical advantage. This thing is really locked in place. It's not going to move. So don't use huge amounts of force here, or you may, again, you may damage the base. When you're going to slide the mast, make sure you loosen it more than just a tiny little bit. You may, if you loosen it only a little, especially with the weight of the head up here, it may chatter as you slide it across. And if you get that, each one of those noises that comes to your ear is the sound of the base of this striking the base plate. And those impacts are going to wear and damage the base plate. So loosen the mast up quite a bit, maybe quarter, maybe half a turn, and then slide it very carefully. Always support the head of the fastening machine when you slide the mast. So for now, we're going to slide the mast over and just lock it way over here out of the way. The next piece of the machine that we're going to put on is going to be the splash pan. But before we do that, let's talk about one other thing having to do with the mast, and that is this exposed little area of the mast core right here. Because the mast, remember, is in two pieces. So there's an exposed little area right there, and that width of that area varies according to this micrometer adjustment. As we change the micrometer to lower fine adjustment and depth cut, then the mast sleeve is going to slide down. And as we raise it, the mast sleeve is going to slide up, exposing this dark area right here. As we cut, we're going to have water, we're going to have chips and pieces of ground up stone that are going to be flying off the lap. And even though we do have a splash pan, some of that stuff is going to spray across, and some of it's going to get on the sleeve of the mast, some of it's going to get on the base plate, some of it's going to get on this base part of the core right here. And what will happen over time, because as we're cutting, the sleeve is going to be rotating, so there's friction, there's abrasive, and you're going to wind up with wear right at that location. That's not a good wear to have. You eventually can get play there, and then it harms the reliability of the machine, the repeatability. So it's a good idea to take steps to protect this part of the machine right here. You can put a little wax on it, a little car wax, but it's also going to have lubricant on it. One of the things I like to do is put a bib on it. I take a little piece of paper towel or even tissue paper, one of these clips, and I just clip that on there. So the head can come down and push it if I'm doing girdles or something, but it just creates a bib there. Doesn't get in the way. It catches little flying bits of swarf and things like that. Another thing that you can do, either instead of or in addition to, is you can use a nice big linen napkin or an old t-shirt or a clean hand towel, and you can just drape it across the machine like this. Protects the controller, protects the base, protects everything. Absorbs that water instead of having to mop it up later, the little water splatter you're going to get. Instead of having to come back later and mop it up, if you just put this napkin here, just absorb it as it gets splattered, and then keep a couple of these around and change them out as they get wet. It's a good way to keep the machine clean, keep it functioning really great, save yourself a lot of headache, and save yourself some maintenance, make your machine last a lot longer. So this is a couple of tips and tricks that I got directly from Jeff Jarvie, and I really like them. The next thing is the splash pan. We're going to attach the splash pan to the machine, and obviously we're assembling a machine that I've used for years, and you can see that there's very little wear on this machine, even though it's had heavy commercial use for years. This is my personal machine. I cut on it all the time, practically a daily basis, and although the splash pan is dirty, the machine shows very little wear. It's because I take very good care of it. A lot of people cut a window out of a splash pan, so when the machine comes down for cutting girdles, they don't bang into the splash pan. Personally, I disagree with cutting it. The splash pan works great the way it comes from the factory. I'll show you some techniques really quick with it about how to control the edge of the pan. You see mine is a little broken in here, but there's no reason really to butcher it up, and then once you cut it, it just causes other problems. So we're going to take our Swarf tube and mate that to the splash pan. Pass the tube through the hole in the base plate and out where you can get to it. Lower the splash pan onto the base. One of the things I've seen people do in the past is they'll get their splash pan on here, and mine's not doing it, but if you don't push the splash pan all the way down, the platen may squeak against the top edge of the splash pan, and so you get squeak, 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 and it's a crazy loud squeaking noise, and people freak out. They think it's, they got bad bearings from the factory or something. That doesn't really happen. So check the inside of your splash pan. Check the inside of your splash pan right here, where the inside edge is next to the platen. Make sure you push it all the way down. That way the moving part of the platen won't rub against it and make squeaks. So we've got our bib, we've got our napkin. It's almost like dinner time. One of the other things that I find really useful is a spill-proof Swarf catcher. This is, you can tell by how ugly this is that I use it all the time. What I do is I take a 1-gallon jug of some sort of drink. I make 2 holes. One is a really small, tiny little air hole. The other is a hole that's just big enough for the Swarf hose, like that. So when this thing sits on the floor, what happens is inevitably we kick these over. If you put this together so the Swarf tube is nice and snug and there's just a small hole, when you kick it over you usually feel it right away, and there's not time for very much of the Swarf to spill and stain your carpet or damage your wood floors or whatever you've got going. So I recommend these. We actually require them at the academy so you don't stain the floor in the room. And it's just very useful, so I try to recommend people make one of these and use them. So let's move on to continuing to assemble the Facetron. We want to attach our head onto the mast, and one of the common things that people will do is they'll try to put the head over the top of the mast like this. This is the way the Alpha Taurus machine assembles. It's not the way the Facetron assembles, and you'll cause problems if you try to put it together this way. So don't do that. First thing we want to do is make sure the hole, the mast receiver, is clean. Make sure you clean that thing out. It's nice to run your finger around any place where parts are going to mate. Make sure there's no burrs. Make sure there's no grit or anything like that. And it's a good idea to clean that out. I use a paper towel with a little Windex or something on it. It's also important that we back out the mast locking bolt, this bolt right here. This thing normally presses against the mast. It's important that we back it out, and I look visually and I also feel to make sure that the bolt is pulled all the way out so it doesn't bang into the mast sleeve when we're trying to assemble it. So now that we know the mast receiver is smooth, clean, and the bolt is out of the way, we're going to lift the sleeve of the mast and lower it through the head. Then we're going to use the mast locking bolt, and again, nothing on the Facetron requires a lot of strength, so just a little press here with the finger, about this much. That's enough to lock the mast in place. Now we're going to lower the mast back onto the core. Always handle the head with 2 hands. The Facetron head is really big and heavy. It's super high precision, and it's got a lot of stuff in it, so it's big, it's heavy. Always handle it with 2 hands, because if you bump this release lever, the head can fall. And you don't want it to fall and damage the lap, the stone, the dop, the base plate. With the quill down like this, you can damage the quill, you can damage the base plate, you can damage everything. A lot of people call this the one failing of the Facetron, that this can happen. It takes a little bit of practice to always use 2 hands. If you just remember the rule, always use 2 hands in handling the head, you won't have any difficulties. And be careful about bumping this. The fact that it can move quickly is part of what makes the Facetron quick to cut on. I can change altitudes really quick with this machine. So I can go from a very shallow angle to a girdle very, very quickly. Just be careful with this locking bolt. A little added thing that you can do is you can add a little wire hook. I make a little stainless steel wire hook myself, put it right around the hard stop knob on the bottom of the head. I take a rubber band from my asparagus. Always eat your asparagus. From my asparagus, pass it under the bottom of the head and over the locking bolt. This causes an automatic catch. This protects me from bumping this, because even though bumping it may allow the head to release, as soon as I'm not bumping it, the rubber band puts enough tension on it to slow down the head or catch it. It also reminds me to always use 2 hands, and then just give it a little fingertip push to make sure it's positively locked in place. It's easy to put our bib back, and after assembly, we don't have to play with that anymore, except perhaps between stones. So this is assembly of the Facetron. We have our drip tank, goes right on the lug, moves really easily. This moves so you can position your drip exactly where you want it. One of the other points about assembling the Facetron is once it is assembled, never ever move the completely assembled machine. By doing that, as soon as you tip the machine, the head will begin to swing around. See this? Just a little bit of change in angle. So if I pick up the machine and start trying to carry it around, the head's going to be swinging wildly all over the place, like that. The thing is really heavy, and when it starts to swing, it's going to generate a lot of momentum. If you have a dop on here or a stone, this is going to bash into things. It might bash into your lap. It might swing outside the machine like this and bash into door frames or other things that are hanging out over here. You can damage your dop. You can knock stones off the dop, break stones, perhaps even bend something. The other thing is the weight distribution on the machine is really uneven to begin with, and when you lift the machine and the head starts swinging around, it makes it really unwieldy. If you begin to lose control of the machine, there's a tendency to grab by the mast. And then you have the weight of the machine wrenching against the mast, you might bend the mast. So you're going to wind up with damage to the machine. Rather than that, always disassemble the machine before you move it. Take off the splash pan, take off the head, take off the mast, move the machine as a base and as a mast, or at the very least a mast and head assembly. Patience is an important part of faceting, so go slowly and don't force anything. Remember also that Jeff Jarvie is happy to talk to customers who have any questions or difficulties with any of these procedures, and that it's always easier and faster to call than to return a damaged machine. The next chapter is about disassembling your new Facetron for transportation or shipping. This has been the assembly video. I hope you enjoyed it.